Welcome back to the table. Today, Ryan and I have a full review of one of AEG's latest games. This is The Guild of Merchant Explorers. Yeah. That may be more words in a title than we've seen in many other board games this year.
It is a bit wordy of a title. They probably could have called it Merchant Explorers, which is generally what I tend to refer to it as. But this is, like David said, The Guild of Merchant Explorers. You are playing as one of those guilds trying to explore out a map by placing cubes on it, exploring different areas, and ultimately trying to gain coins, which become your victory points at the end of the game. But there's a lot of twists and turns into how you actually play this game that I think turn it into a real puzzle.
Yeah, it's definitely puzzly. I want to say it's kind of given me the same sort of vibes as some puzzly roll and writes do. But you're not rolling, you're not writing, you are flipping. Yeah. So when you flip cards, it kind of has that feel too. And the map, theoretically, well, no, it really couldn't have been a write because you have to remove your cubes.
Right, and that's kind of the thing. It is kind of a route building or network building game where you're playing these cards, you're placing cubes out on your board, trying to create these villages, which become your hubs for future rounds, which let you start in other places on the map. You can start expanding out your network in different ways. But yeah, that's the key is like every round after you're done placing all your cubes, you wipe and you restart. So you play over like 4 different rounds. And so you're going to be doing that process a lot. And as you're kind of expanding out, where you've placed in previous rounds really is going to matter. And I think that's something that I really like about the game.
Yeah, there's a lot to like about the game, but let's give you an idea of what's sitting here on the table in front of us just before we get into things. We, of course, have our maps. These are, I think, the 2 first maps that they recommend starting with.
Yeah.
But there are many, many maps in the game. These are double-sided. There's another map on the back. Some of the maps have special rules, different things that can kind of come into play. But it gives you a lot of variety right there. Then you've got this board. I think it's called the Explore board, but it is the main board in the game, and it's got a couple things going on. This top row is where you're going to be flipping Explore cards. There are these 5 Explore cards in this deck every single time, plus one of these Investigate cards. This is a card that's going to trigger, and we're going to show you how this works because it's probably one of the cooler aspects of the game. But these cards get shuffled into the Explore deck in each of the 4 rounds. And there's a bunch of Investigate cards that we're going to be taking here that are going to really sort of spice up what we can do and make you feel like variable player powers for sure.
Yeah, and the game is super easy to teach because of this row right here, because really all you're doing is flipping over one of these cards and placing it where it's supposed to go. So you know exactly which 5 cards you're going to see every round. You just don't know the order they're going to come out. And each of these cards tells you what kind of terrain you can explore and what kind of pattern you can make. So if we drew this one right away, which is a line of 3 water, we can explore 3 water spaces by taking our cubes and placing them out in a pattern of 3. Now, at the start of the game, you have a city that you can start from or a castle in the center of the map. But then in future turns, you can start from any one of your villages. So the goal is to kind of create these villages by filling in terrain groups. And that's where this puzzle comes into play, because if you're hoping to fill in, for example, this grassland terrain, you might need to use some of these question marks to make that whole pattern appear. You kind of have to plan ahead on what you want to do on your turn in order to make the most use of those villages.
Yeah, for example, if we played this card here that's going to let you fill in any 2 grasslands. Now, these don't have to be adjacent, as you can see by the icon. We're all going to take 2 cubes and place them on any grasslands that are legal, extending from either our city or our village or any place where we already have explorers. And if we put them 2 right here, one thing you're going to do is when you cover up coins, you're going to get those coins. Those are points, by the way. Whoever has the most coins at the end wins. But you can see here that I've almost filled in this green region. And a region is going to be just any contiguous group of 1 color. So on a future turn, if we did this one that lets us do any 2 adjacent, regardless of what type it is, I could do this green right here, and maybe this mountain that has another coin on it. The moment you fill in a region, you're going to remove one of the cubes in that region that is on an empty space. So 2 of these 3 are empty. So I could remove this one, or actually better this one, and place one of my villages down. So now, in this round and in future rounds after the cubes clear, I can extend or grow from my main city or this village, like Ryan was saying.
Yeah, and planning those villages is key because you're going to get points for placing those villages. It gives you places to go off of, but also you want to be sure where you're placing or what you're covering for a variety of different reasons, because there's not only coins that you can cover to get points, there's also these cities that you can cover, and if you ever connect two cities, you get a coin multiplier.
Yeah.
You can build these trading posts. There's some discovery towers that you can place out on the board in order to score cascading points throughout the game. There's ruins that you can explore in order to get treasure cards. Also, in addition to all of that, there are different objectives, and there are several different objectives for each map, and you're going to use 3 of them that are going to encourage you to play in a different way. So you're trying to balance all of this, covering the different terrain while also fulfilling these. Like, there's so many different decisions you have to make, and you're not going to be able to do all of it. So you really need to plan ahead for that puzzle, but you can never really be sure exactly what's going to happen because you don't get to control the order that those come out.
No, it is a very fun puzzle to solve, and if you're already thinking, well, can't people just play the exact same game as each other? You could. If you could look around the board and basically copy everyone. But in sort of the ilk of those games that I've played in the past, I felt like this one didn't lend itself to that happening as much.
Well, yeah.
Like I was playing 2-player just the other day, and even after that first turn or two, we did something different.
But also, you're going to unlock special powers that are unique to you, and things that can't be copied by other players. Every round, you're going to get to draw one, and this number 1 card gets mixed into the deck, and when it flips for the first time, everyone gets to draw 2 of these investigate cards and choose one. And these are, for me, the fun of the game, because this is an entire deck of wildly different cards, and you know I love this when you look at a card that completely breaks all the rules you know, and you go, no way.
Yeah, especially in your very first play of this game. You're going to play the first round, and then when you get to that card and you look at these cards for the first time, like Ryan just said, you're going to look at them, and not only are you going to feel that way, but just relative to the very basic explore actions. Because what these do effectively is when you draw that card, you take 2, you're going to play 1 next to the 1 space and discard the other one, and then you're immediately going to use that action. Now, in future rounds, that 1 card is going to be in the deck again, so now you're going to have this thing firing off each round. And then in the last round, there's actually a card here that has a 1, 2, and a 3 on it. That one allows you to use one of the 3 powers that you're going to have by the end of the game twice. So it really gives you an incredible amount of variety of the powers that you can use throughout the game, and that's going to be different every single game.
That's what makes this game shine for me, is those powers. And the fact that, that 1 power you get, choose carefully, because you're going to get to use that 3 times, possibly even 4 times. The second one you get, and there's going to be a second card that gets added that you're going to use 2 times, right? So knowing when these come up, or like that surprise of like when you get to draw a new one, it always feels really satisfying, especially if you can come up with 3 powers that work really well together. And that's also why you're not going to be able to copy what other people are doing, because maybe mine lets me fill in a bunch of water spaces and cross over to one of these new islands, and yours doesn't. I can start building off in a different island. Maybe you're going in a completely different direction. And again, we're competing for these different achievements. So if somebody's already got one, you don't want to necessarily copy them and do it second. You maybe want to try to focus on doing something they're not doing so that you can be the first, because I mean, that's double the points if you're the first one to do it.
Yeah, these objectives really do help with that, because as soon as someone grabs one, you're like, okay, well, how close are they to this one? Okay, I'm going to go after that one then. But even, I think, just naturally, the idea of building out in different directions, it's just going to happen. I don't think people are going to be looking around, because the puzzle that's sitting here right in front of you is interesting enough to solve. So you're going to do this, like we said, over the 4 rounds, going through those 5 cards, plus adding these throughout. So by the last round, you're going to be doing, 9 different explore actions. So the game builds and builds and builds, and you're going to get out to these edges where you can get some of these discovery towers. You'll have scored or grabbed a bunch of treasure cards at some various ruins. Now, some of these treasure cards, they'll do immediate things, like this one lets you just put down another explorer immediately. This one, however, like many of them, are endgame scoring for a variety of different things. This is just a set collection for this specific type of card, but other ones give you some additional endgame scoring based on what you've done on your map.
Yeah, points for your different villages, points for things that you've done over the course of the game that are going to direct your play. Maybe they want you to have villages on a specific terrain, like villages on grassland. If you get that early enough, then you can kind of direct how you're going to play for the rest of the game. So I think that there's actually just a lot that goes into your decisions. You've got a lot of options in this game. And you can pretty much, with the powers, you can kind of plan out your strategy and kind of do what you want to do, except every single time the cards are going to flip off exactly when you don't need them to.
Right.
That's kind of the fun of the game too, is trying to realize, okay, if I can get the mountain first, that connects me over to the desert, and then I can place 2 deserts. Of course, the desert's going to flip first. I'm not adjacent to any deserts. Oh, well, that was poor planning on my part. That kind of thing can happen. But when the game is only 30 to 45 minutes, I don't know that luck is at all punishing.
So speaking of the game being 30 to 45 minutes, let's talk about the things we liked and the things we didn't like about this game. If you can't tell by the tone of this video thus far, we like the game. But there are, I think, a couple things to point out that I would say some people might look at as negatives. One of those is not the playtime. The playtime is incredibly fast. So for what this game gives you in 30 to 45 minutes, I think that's one of the best things I can say about this game. You don't really get this type of variety in many games like this. I also would say I haven't played a lot of games just like this in terms of like building the network, removing some of it, but leaving effectively those nodes or villages in this case, so that in the next round you're able to do so much more different things and sort of like make progress one round that's not going to pay off until the second or maybe even the third round.
Yeah, it reminded me a little bit of Blue Lagoon. If you've played Blue Lagoon, you have that like where you split the second half of the game, you have to build out from the villages you place, but you're doing that 4 times. And so your ability to spread those villages out is really key. And I would agree, I haven't really played a game just like this before. A game that every turn feels so satisfying. Every time you draw your special new cards, it feels satisfying. Every time you get to use these cards, it feels really good. And they've packed a lot into 45 minutes. And because you're just drawing the card and everyone's doing their action, it plays simultaneously. The game doesn't really drag on with more players because you're just all taking your turns at the same time.
Yeah, and I'd say one other big positive is that variability that gives you that sort of fresh feeling every single time you play it. Not only the maps, but if you couldn't tell already, these cards, these investigate cards that you get throughout the game, it is one of the coolest things. In fact, the first time Ryan played this a few weeks ago, he was at a local game store and he played it once with a friend, and then he called me while they were like effectively setting up the second game to see if I was available to come and play it because he liked it so much and thought I would too. And he was right. This thing right here is one of sort of my favorite things in gaming. When you get one of these and you're like, oh, whoa, that is really cool. And then you're looking at someone else's power and you're like, oh, I wish I had that one right now. That adds a lot of flavor and a lot of variety. And it makes this game sort of just playable and playable and playable. You've sat down and played it and then played it again multiple times,
I actually don't think I've ever just sat down and played it once. Like, we've always played it at least, because once you get everything out and you play for like 30 or 45 minutes, you're like, what? Like, let's just play again.
That's an amazing thing to be able to say about any game.
Well, and because you mentioned the variability, one thing we didn't really mention or really talk about deeply was that how different all of these maps are. It's not just that they're different layouts. They all have their own set of objective cards, and you're using 3. So even when you're playing the same map over and over again, you're getting different objective cards. And these maps add other components. They give you other things to do. Like, there's one that has you out like mining crystal gems and like scoring multiplier points for those gems. Like, they're vastly different maps. So the experience of playing them is very different. Some of the maps are easier. Some of them are more challenging if you want like a harder puzzle. It definitely offers that as well. But this is a very accessible game that anyone can play. But of course, you know, the more experienced gamers are going to see those combos maybe a little easier. They're going to be able to evaluate different powers that work well together. And I think that it actually has a lot to offer for gamers that like that kind of style of gameplay, but in a much smaller package than you normally expect.
Yeah, if you're looking for another one of those games that's very accessible, but at the same time enjoyable for enthusiast gamers, like Ryan said, this is absolutely one of those types of games. Now, there is effectively, I think for me, just one minor downside, but it can be a little physically fiddly.
I don't think you should I agree with you. I mean, because as you're playing the game, like as you explore the ruins, you're putting down these like exploration or ruins tokens to show that you've already explored them.
And putting a cube on top of those.
Right. And as you're doing the trading posts, you're putting these trading post things out to mark that you've explored that trading post. And then at the end of the round, when you're cleaning everything up, I mean, it's very easy. Like, it is just very easy to bump things and move things and make sure all these little tokens stay where they're gonna stay. And like, for some people, that's probably gonna get really annoying.
But not too. I don't think it's too annoying.
It doesn't bother me a ton, but it's enough that I can recognize That's the weakest part of the game for me, is that after the round trying to clean up
And that's
all
not,
of my cubes.
And if that's the worst thing we can say, that's saying something.
I mean,
because
it
I will
really
say,
is.
I agree. It was there enough for us to acknowledge it here in this review, because in our plays, the different people that I played it with, they all said that too.
Yeah.
Like everyone was enjoying the game, but like by round 2 or definitely 3, when people are cleaning up their boards, someone might go, it is kind of fiddly a little. But again, minor complaint, as long as you just remember where, note where all your villages are and don't accidentally remove them from the board. The game really is just incredibly accessible and has a lot to offer enthusiast gamers.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about that when we talked about doing a review, and I thought about what I would score this game at, and I don't know if I've seen a game like this that just promises so much and actually delivers on it. When you sit down at this game, it's even called the Guild of Merchant Explorers, and you get that feeling of exploration, of discovery.
Oh, for sure.
Every time even when you play the same map, it really does what it promises to do, and because of that, I'm giving it a 9. I mean, this is as close to a 10 as I can come. I mean, there's just some minor things with the fiddliness, and also you can have some bad draws on the investigate cards where neither one of them are super helpful.
Sometimes.
It's rare. It can happen. I hesitate to say that any game is a perfect game, but this just, if you know what this game is offering to you, it does exactly that, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. It doesn't. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a perfect 9.
I agree. These kind of games, I'm starting to see this mix of accessibility and depth being closer and closer to the top of my ranks. Not giving it a 10, but I would agree. I would give it a 9, a very, very solid 9. This game, I don't imagine people playing this and not enjoying it at least a little bit. Maybe not as much as us.
No.
We're very, very happy with the game. I would put this, even though it's a completely different type of game, Nidavellir is probably the last game that I've played that I felt was very easy to play for everyone, very light,
Yeah.
pretty short,
Yep.
and also offered a fair amount of depth for people who want a little bit more depth. And I feel like in a very different way, this achieves those same things for me.
And it's also much easier to set up and to teach. The teach for this game is like 5 minutes.
Oh yeah, the teach is, that's true. That is true. This is incredibly easy to teach, much easier to teach probably than Nidavellir in terms of all the different things and how they work. But anyway, those are our thoughts on our review for the Guild of Merchant Explorers. If you have any thoughts or opinions or questions, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer whatever we can about the game. And until next time, of course, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.